Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Filth. So every once in a while upon this channel, I want to go on and be a little bit more creative. I can't just put out the same old song and dance and assume people are going to dance to it. So when looking at that, I'm just like, okay, well, I can freaking, let's get creative here. Let's get some interesting visuals that people are like, what the is that? What the is this movie? And this might be it, where it goes on and is to be a film that is to make people be really interested in a movie that is to be very weird and very creative, let's just say. Going into this movie, I would have to go on and say that this movie is kind of visually fascinating by how it approaches itself. But it also is very aggressive, and it is very one of a kind, let's just say that. We go into a very dark story where we have a number of things to kind of pull away from this film. And we also have it to where, of course, we have Bruce, who is to be up for this police promotion of inspector, and so he's going through and sizing all of these people that he is to go and fight for this promotion, start sizing them up and see how he can kind of tear them down or figure out how he can go on and skate by and get this promotion, because we of course have it to where Bruce is to have, of course, his wife, who is to motivate him into becoming this inspector. But we end up finding out that Bruce may or may not have the things that he is to may or may not have throughout this film, let's just say, in a very cryptic-like sense. We go into this movie, and this movie is very aggressive, going into having a number of either office affairs or just affairs in general, especially with Bruce. We go on and have it to consistently be that these police officers, these cops, are to go on and really push the buttons of certain characters to either get information or to get ahead one way or another. Or get head, let's just say. So we go into this movie, and we of course have a film that of course is to be a Christmas movie, because why weirdly not. I think the thing that I enjoy the most is to be the very first song that comes on at credits. I was like, man, I really enjoyed that song. I was listening to it afterwards, and I was like, yeah, I have to figure out what this song is, because it was is a really good song. But anyways, so the real story of this movie is that Bruce is to go on and try to dwindle down his promotion competition. But as he's going on and trying all these numerous things to go and demasculate or to just tarnish certain people, we start to realize that Bruce himself, while going and having all these things in the fire, so to speak, Bruce is starting to turn around, and he is slipping also. That he is slipping further and further down the rabbit hole, to where he is going on and starting to see animals where faces should be. Basically going on and having a number of guys that he is to see with an elephant face or a witch face, or an animal like a bird or something like that throughout this film. And we also have a lot of things that have compiled that are all haunting Bruce whatsoever, which may eventually be the ghost of maybe his brother that I guess had burnt in a fire, or that possibly he is not 100% sure that that anything is to really be anything at some point. Whether he is to be unsure about going to a therapist, that he even has a wife, or any number of things. He's just very unsure. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this film. I think it's about time to just go through the rabbit hole of this weird and creative movie because I think it's about that time. Where can you go on and see this film? I would say you can go out of your way. The immediately easiest thing would go on and say that you could probably go on to Tubi right now, TUBI. If you have a Google account, you can easily go into that app and watch any single thing for free. You can go on to eventually. I think there's like a ton of apps. Like there's probably Voodoo VUDU that might have this movie for free. But there's a lot of options that you can probably go on and once you hit into Google and search this movie, you can go on and easily find a number of apps that you can watch this for free. But the easiest one would just say, "Hey, check this out on Tubi." So with that said, I think it's about that time to otherwise go into that double five. Let's otherwise go into spoilers about this one. So it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I get to spoil this movie. So the very beginning of this film is that we have a woman named Carol that is to be motivating Bruce to get this promotion, and she's motivating him by being the ultimate tease. Going on and figuring out a way for Bruce to want to dwindle down his competition as Bruce is to make it into the office one day and start going and really playing up the odds. Going on and having certain secret things that only he knows about a certain number of his coworkers that Bruce at some point is starting to dwindle them down and break them down, so to speak. Because Bruce is to, of course, know Lexan, that eventually is wanting to throw his hat in to this inspector thing. And Lexan is to not only be a drug addict, but also he is to have a very small manhood, let's just say. And because I'm going to have to curve and creatively just kind of skirt around things in this review because of the way in which that things are to be presented. So we also have Gilman that is to possibly be up for this promotion. And Gilman will find in this movie Bruce is going and having an affair with his wife, and it seems that more and more Gilman is to realize that. And Gilman is to go on and start to putting the pieces together, but he doesn't know who it actually is. And eventually, towards the end of the movie, we have Gilman's wife who ends up leaving him. So we have it to where Gilman is not all that focused upon his promotion because Bruce is to certify that by having an affair with his wife. We have Drummond, who of course is to be a female detective, where we immediately have Bruce, who's kind of tearing her down in his mind, going and saying that this girl is probably to just sleep with anybody to get a higher thing of pay, sadly enough. We have Inglis, who of course is to be a man where you have to question eventually in this film numerous times over who he is to bring home to bed at night. Where we go on and we have this man's sexuality being brought to question consistently in this movie, whether it's via a toilet stall, whether it's to be at a club where Bruce is to go on and pay some man to pretend to be Inglis's lover, and so on and so forth. We have Gus. Gus is to seemingly be a man that doesn't have a real amount of high intelligence to the point of where imagining him being in some weird like school where he's wearing this dunce hat and he's just like, like, yeah, like I'm not that smart, I'm not that intelligent, and so on and so forth. Like, man, for probably a number of these characters, they probably all really had fun with this movie because they were all being put into these weird and or goofy roles. So we go on here and we are defined in this story via Bruce's superior, who of course is to be told that there is to have been a number of gang members that are to have gone on and killed some man in some tunnel. And we weirdly have Toll, who ends up calling this tunnel to be some umbilical cord. And I'm like, what the is that? And Bruce is like, well, I would rationally call that the tunnel. So we have it to where, of course, Bruce is to now have to figure out who this murderer is and to try and come up with some conclusions. So we go on and we have both Bruce and we have Lexan who are trying to come up with like some kind of idea of who this murderer was. But they're also just going on and just doing some common crimes here at first. So we go on and we have both Bruce and we have Lexan who are to follow a man called Aki, who of course is to be Leon Day K. Crester, who of course a lot of people know him from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We go and we have this blonde-haired mohawked guy that is going on and taking a woman with him that is far too young for him and taking him to some apartment. So we have Bruce and we have Lexan who is to follow these two, break into this apartment, and is going on and then questioning Aki and going on and telling him that, hey, like, that girl that you had went with, like, I'm sure she's far too young for you. We can go on and we can adjust her age to say that maybe she was possibly far too young for you. Maybe 10, 11, 8. Yeah, 8 will really do it. And so we're going on and we're having Bruce and we're having Lexan who's wanting to squeeze this guy for any kind of information by telling him that's like, hey, like, give us anything that you like, give us anything, any dirt that you have, because if not, we're gonna go and send you to jail. Where there's of course, a guy named the Beast that goes on and is to destroy wild stock or cattle with his huge, massive manhood. And he goes on and he like breaks the horns off bulls and all kinds of things. That like this guy is to be so dangerous that we had to go and put him in prison, and you wouldn't want a man like that to go through you, so to speak. So hey, like, give us up some information. I'm like, oh my god. Like, this movie starts out freaking wild. So Aki's going on and wanting to talk, and so Bruce goes in with this girl, and we of course find out that this girl named, I believe, Stephanie, is to be 16 years old. And he's like, well, yeah, like, this guy is much too old for you, and so, like, who's your father? And so all of a sudden, this Stephanie girl is to say what her father's name is. And so Bruce is just like, well, like, you wouldn't want your father knowing what you had done here. Like, would you? As basically we have Bruce, who is kind of unbuttoning and zipping, and if you know what I mean. So we start to have Stephanie, who is to be performing, let's just say, for Bruce to pull back and call what she had done or her technique is to be more like a cheese grater, to where he has absolutely no interest in having this girl doing any sucking of any kind. So Bruce goes off and is to make further into his way of just wanting to get off one way or another. So I'm going to bounce around a lot through this review to kind of get a lot of different things kind of done and out of the way here. Because there's a lot to stuff to digest and dissect and whatever throughout this film. So there's just a jumbled mess of stuff going on in this film. So we consistently have it where Bruce is going on throughout this film and talking to Blade Z's wife, who is called Bunty. And so we consistently have it to where Bruce is going and aggressively calling this girl and going on and figuring out a way for her to get jazzed, so to speak, by talking to Bruce, as Bruce is going on and sounding very much like a guy named Sidebottom. So we go on. We have Bruce, who is, of course, aggressive to this girl and wanting her to kind of play with him on this phone. But Bunty has no interest, and she's consistently just hanging up this phone. So we go on, and we, of course, have Toll that is to find out about these kind of perv calls. And now not only Bruce is to have to solve this murder, but then also have to solve this whole prank call case. And so Bruce is like, okay, I'm on it. Because if Bruce to have such a big workload, then he'll go on and possibly get promoted over anyone else. So we go on into this film, and so Bruce is to, of course, let me have a moment here. Let me have a second here. Let me pause here for a second. All right. So again, this is probably a jumbled mess of being all over the place, but that's what happens when you review a film and it's kind of has a jumbled mess of stuff. So we have Bruce, who is to go on and is to see a woman named Mary, who has her husband that is down on the ground and he is dying. Bruce is scrambling as if no one else is going to help this woman. And so Bruce is starting to perform CPR to revive this man, as Bruce is going on and trying to tell anybody to go on and call an ambulance. So we go on from time to time and have Bruce, who of course is seeing Mary, and she's going on and giving Bruce a scarf, going on and talking about, of course, her husband's death and her her funeral. So we go on and we have Bruce, who is going to this one flower shop where he is to see a girl, I believe, who is named Estelle, and start questioning her about things. And Bruce is to all of a sudden see that Mary is there trying to get flowers for her husband, I guess for his grave. And then we have Bruce is kind of remembering that moment there. So, but Bruce is going on and trying to talk to Estelle and kind of pressing her up against this thing and wanting to squeeze her for information one way or the other, so to speak. So we go on and we further on in this film are to have Bruce go and supposedly see a therapist called Dr. Rossi. And we go on and we have Bruce, who's speaking to Dr. Rossi, and he's talking about how his day is going and if there's any prescriptions that he needs to be refilled and so on and so forth. To where all of a sudden we see this warped vision of Dr. Rossi going on and talking to Bruce about a tapeworm and like reminding him about his past, about his brother, and just haunting him, and doing all these weird sing along like things. The further and further we go on to this film, where Dr. Rossi's going like, "Hey, here's some more pills for your pain," and to where we just get it to where the further and further we go into this film, the larger and larger these medicine bottles just get, and to where more and more we have Bruce going down the rabbit hole of consistently seeing certain characters that, of course, are very warped and don't quite make any rational sense of being an animal or something like that. So let's get to the Christmas party. So, because this is going to be very random and a very wild and roundabout way. So, and I've already said that numerous times now, but I want to I want to concretely say that this is nowhere close, probably to anywhere part of this movie because there's so much of a jumbled mess of this film. So, Bruce is to go on and have a office party for Christmas, and so Bruce is going on and talking about how they can go on and have some kind of game in the office. The game that, of course, Bruce is going to try and put on here is to have all the guys go into this photocopier and take a copy of their dangalang, their manhood, to see if there is to, of course, be a woman that is just to be called Size Queen in this movie, to see if whoever is to impress this woman the most, that they're going to go on and be able to thrust into her after this whole choice of who is the biggest Johnson is to get into winning this girl over. So all of a sudden we start to have all the men who are going on and making a copy of their manhood, for us to all of a sudden have the realization that Bruce had gone on and enlarged his image upon this copier, and he, of course, had won this. And so once Size Queen is going on and getting ready to like feel the horse-like manhood upon her with Bruce, she is to realize that horse manhood is not quite exactly what this guy is to have, and she's like, "Ah!" as Bruce is just going on, and so eventually we later on have it where, of course, Drummond is going and telling Bruce, like, "Yeah, we know that you used a size enlarger to mess with that girl." Because we have Drummond who's eventually going to Bruce and saying that he's going on and he is like taking advantage of people, to the point of the one girl who's to be called the Size Queen. And Bruce is just like, "Well, hey, like, she chose to drink. She chose to say yes. She chose to do all the stuff that she was eventually to choose to do. So, like the decision was not, or the decision was in her hands. She could have refused, but she didn't." So we go on into this story, and let me pause here for 1 second. All right. But then eventually we go further and further, of course, through this movie, and are having it be that we have Drummond that is kind of asking Bruce, like, more and more further, like, if he is to really be fit for duty. Going on and having Bruce, who is to possibly start seeing things, and is to start being afraid of certain visuals he has to go on and see. And we have Drummond, who's asking Bruce if he has gone on to like kind of seek therapy or help, and Bruce is very unsure. And so we have Drummond, who's like, well, like, do you like, can you lean on your wife? And Bruce is just like, well, I think my wife has left me. But again, he's not really sure about that either. So we go on into this story, and so Bruce is going to have to go and deal with the case of Bladesy's wife, Bunty, who is getting these calls. So Bruce is coming to Bunty and is to go on and tell her, it's like, well, hey, normally anyone else would go on and tell you to not give in to this person's calls, but I'm going to tell you to do the exact opposite. I'm going to tell you to give in to him, so that way he'll probably be scared off and he'll finally like get what he wants, or otherwise he's just going to consistently keep on hounding you until things go away. So we go on, and later in the film have Bunty, who eventually is to go on and have an affair with Bruce, because Bunty is just very unsure about Bladesy, and it doesn't really seem like he is as confident as Bruce is, or that Bunty wants just Bladesy to be more confident like Bruce is. So we go on into this story and have Bruce, who is going off with Bladesy, and we of course have Bruce, who's really going on and trying to have a massive amount of fun upon this trip with him and Bladesy, where he's going on and breaking this guy's glasses, forcing him to not be able to see what he's doing, where he's going, and whatever, to where we have Bruce and Bladesy that's in a museum, and Bladesy is to toss this thing, or Bruce is to toss this thing to Bladesy as this alarm goes off and Bruce is running off, and Bladesy is like tripping and falling on this thing because he can't really see. Bruce is going on and taking Bladesy to this bar and getting him very drunk and putting like pills into his drink. And so all of a sudden, Bladesy is getting very high, up to the point of him going on weirdly dancing with these guys and just having this this rope on him, that this lidded rope, and he's like going and like dancing with these guys and like, yeah, like and then all of a sudden Bladesy is to just be so like so energized that he is going on and like screaming and wailing, while like we have Bruce, who's trying to get Bladesy to bed, and Bladesy is just like, ah, he's screaming, and like he just can't stop going. He just can't stop just go. And Bruce is going on and telling Bladesy, it's like, well, hey, like you have to go, you have to calm down because you're ruining my trip. You're ruining my you're ruining my high. So Bruce is going into another room, just kind of forcing Bladesy to just kind of like just eventually just tire himself out. So as if he's some baby or if he's some child. So Bruce is going on to continue having this affair to the point of Gilman realizing that his wife is to leave him. And so Bruce, at some point, every time he is to sleep with a woman, he is to immediately see a number of different characters when he is sleeping with someone. Sometimes he's to go on and see his wife. Sometimes he is to see some man. Sometimes he is to see any number of things, or an animal, or whatever. So Bruce is at some points just kind of losing his mojo, so to speak, just because he is to not get these images weirdly out of his head. Even at one point, having him going and seemingly going into throw of passion with Adolf Hitler at some point, just because he's like having all these weird, bizarre like dreams. Having it to where Bruce is trying to motivate himself in a bathroom stall uh, to give himself a little bit of jerkin, and to all of a sudden not have the motivation to get this through, to get this done, and to where all of a sudden he goes on and decides, as well, if I can't get myself off, then I'm going to be able to get my self off in another way. And so Brucey is to write something into a bathroom stall that is to question Inglis's kind of who he is to bring to bed at night, so to speak. And so we go on and we have Bruce who's like telling this guy about this thing that like is to be told upon this bathroom stall, and that somebody had gone on and put graffiti upon this bathroom stall. And so we go on and we have Inglis who is just going on and like, well, I'll just go and I'll just clean it off. And we have Bruce who's like, no, like, we have to find who the culprit was that was to put this slander upon my coworkers, upon my coworker, like, and this and that, trying to do the right thing here. And so Bruce is to go so far as to bring this up to his superior, and then his superior is to bring him to his office, like, well, uh, like, hey, like, I don't know if this guy is this way or not, but like, do you think that maybe he is? And we're going on and we're having Bruce is like, I don't know, like, this guy's very mysterious. So so we go on, and we are of course to have Bruce that of course is to continue to slowly but surely lose his effing mind, to the point of us going on and finding out that Bruce himself is to at some points dress up like Carol, as if he is like Norman Bates from Psycho. And we have it at some point where Bruce is sounding like Carol, and it seems that Carol was to be a witness to this one man going and being killed by this group of people. And so later on, we go and we have Estelle, who is to have figured out that Bruce was to be that guy that was witnessing this beating. And because Carol is to go on and is to kind of be walking around town, and so this this gang of guys are to go on and grab Carol, and who is actually Bruce, and bring him into this one kind of broken down, abandoned warehouse, and go on, and they are naturally going to possibly kill him here because technically Bruce is to be the only witness to this whole event. So we go on and we have one of the guys who's going on and like playing around with Bruce, kissing Bruce, going on and saying that's like, well, yeah, like we're gonna do all kinds of things with this guy, with this person. And so Bruce all of a sudden is to kind of kick back in, and is to go and take this guy and chuck him out this window. And after he goes on and does that, I guess the police had been called, and so both Inglis and Drummond had been called to this this spot, where of course Bruce is to be now dressed as his wife. And they're going on and saying like, "Hey man, uh, like we're not going to talk about this to anybody, but like, man, you really need to go and seek some help." So we go on, and we of course have Bruce that is to go on and uh, tell Bunty that he thinks that Bladesy is to be her prank phone caller. Basically, by Bruce and Bladesy going and seeing a character known as Sidebottom. And so Bladesy is trying to do an impersonation of Sidebottom. And so Bruce is to record that and is to go on and bring this to Bunty as Bruce and Bunty are having this affair. Bruce is giving the tape of Bladesy doing this Sidebottom impression. So we go on and we have Bladesy that is in this mental hospital. And we go on and we have Bruce who is seeing Bladesy and he's starting to beat Bladesy up. And so Bladesy is saying Bruce, it's like, well, hey, like, why are you doing this? Like, why go on and hurt me? I thought we were friends. And Bruce is really just because, like, he's saying it's like, well, I can. And that, like, we end up seeing, like, the darker side of this character that is just to go on and either use people or to go on and just destroy them because he has that power, he has that ability, or he is just chess moving people so that way he can go on and do what he wants to do, and so on and so forth. So at the very end of this, we are to go on, and after Bruce is to be outed as Carol, we go on, and of course we have Toll, of course Bruce's superior, that is demoting him and is going on and telling him like, well, hey, like you need to go and you need to put on like the dress blues because we're demoting you, giving you less responsibility. And so we go on and we of course have that we find out that Lexi is to actually get this promotion and is going on and now basically putting the boots to Bruce to really just say it's like, well, hey, like I didn't really think I was gonna get this promotion, but I guess like since Bruce had gone on and done what he had done, it made Lennox the perfect candidate to have taken this promotion from Bruce. And so now we have it to where Lexin is telling Bruce, it's like, well, hey, like all that stuff from the past, all the things that you've ever made fun of me for, yeah, how about we just stop that right now? How about we just go on and have you never mention any of that stuff ever again? Cause like guess what? Like you're far more loony than I am, so you have far more problems than I do. So yeah. So we go on and have Bruce, who's going to this grocery store where he is to spot Mary again, and it's going on, and we have Bruce at some points where Mary is going on and giving Bruce a scarf, and she ends up bumping him later on in this store, and so Bruce is going on, and there's a lot of times where he is to see a blonde woman, and he is confusing her as Carol at some points. And so Bruce is going on and trying to be very nice to Mary, and Mary is to go on and say that she has a kid that at some points she wants this kid to be just like Bruce, and so on and so forth. So After Bruce is to realize that, of course, he is to get demoted here, and that all of this darkness and all the stuff that is kind of haunting him just won't go away, to the point of him deciding to go on and use the scarf that he is to get from Mary, after he is to go on and give Bladesy this video telling him to be a much more confident person, and that he's his best friend, his only friend, and is to tell him to try to be more confident and this and that. So Bruce goes on and is to take this scarf and create a noose out of it, and is to go on and decide to take his own life. But coincidentally, right before he does that, it seems that somebody's knocking on his door, and we go on. We have Bruce, who is deciding to go through with it anyways and finish things up, so to speak. So, really, there's a lot of stuff here that I didn't exactly cover, but there's a lot of stuff to go on and cover here. Like, we have at one point where Chrissy is going and meeting up with Bruce, and we have this thing here where they consistently say to one another to turn the gas on. And so we have Chrissy, who is to go on and see Bruce, and she has left her husband. And now Chrissy is to want to go on and be with Bruce and continue to push him to eventually want him to go on and perform some acts with her. And Chrissy just keeps pushing and pushing Bruce to the point of him just not being able to have the ability to just perform for her. But Bruce is going on and being very vicious when we are to first really see both Bruce and Chrissy together. How Chrissy is to say to Bruce that Chrissy is to think that Bruce loves her, and Bruce is just like, well, hey, like, you know what, like, I'm willing to go on and get through you through your body or through your mind, but I'm never going to get through to you through your heart. So just get that through your, like, get that through your brain or whatever, that there's nothing ever going to be anything more than what we have. Because we just have Bruce that is to see this relationship as just being his convenient affair. So we have it to where Chrissy, now needing something from Bruce, is to go on and have her push until she gets it, and Bruce is just not in the mood. So really, that's a very weird thing to kind of finish off of. But let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I probably had forgotten about, because I'm sure that there probably is something that I've forgotten about, because there was a lot of stuff to unpack through this movie. Let me know in the comments below how you felt weirdly about this movie, because I'm sure people will have their own set of opinions, or to go on and question my taste in film and whatever. But at the end of the day, I will always tell people that every single movie and every single show would eventually have to get reviewed anyways. There's a lot of times where I could just say, well, like, man, this movie is a lot more tame than this show that's weirdly popular right now, and people love this show for some oddball reason, or like, because there's obviously a show that I would immediately just pull right through it, or pull to right now, and just say, like, hey, at least this feels tamer than this show, aka Euphoria. Yeah, that show is very dark and really, like, has a story that I'm like, man, this show is just weird, where it goes to and where it heads. So speaking of head, I think I'm going to head my way out of here and call this one a reviewed film. Let me know in the comments below any number of things, whatever. Just you can request a certain movie, a certain film. At the end of the day, I will probably go on and look through and and see if I can go on and deservingly enough review that, or at some points in time, whatever. It is what it is. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Hopefully, I've technically covered everything. I think I've kind of done the thing in bulk, where I've kind of just gone on and just like retroactively just kind of gone on and covered most and bits and whatever this. So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.